good evening and welcome to tonight's Navigating Pensions and SIPPs webinar with me. My name is Zoe and I'll be hosting tonight's webinar, which is sponsored by the fabulous Invest Engine as well. You may be familiar with them from the previous series that we've done, or at least this is the kind of end of this series from the previous webinars that we've done with Invest Engine. And it's super exciting because we're back here today to talk about the SIPP. Just seen somebody put a message saying that they can't hear me. Would be great if somebody else could give me a thumbs up so I can find out if it's an isolated incident or if it's widespread. I think, hoping that my microphone is working and there's people that can hear me. A few people are saying no sound, a bit strange. Can hear you okay. Okay. Thank you guys for letting me know. I think if there are any issues with sound, you just got to go out and come back in, unfortunately. But I'll pop that in the chat box just shortly. So this webinar will be recorded and available for our members afterwards. So if there is anything that you do want to come back to, you can always check in on it later. You'll be able to find it in our recorded webinars section. And of course, if you have got any questions whilst I'm going through here on the live session, please do feel free to ask away in the Q&A box. I'll do my very best to answer any questions that we've got at the end. And indeed, if you've got any questions for Invest Engine at the end, we've also got the fabulous Elspeth joining us. She'll be on just later to show us around the brand new SIPP as well. And it really is hot off the press with Invest Engine. It was launched this morning. So super exciting that we could be here to talk all things pensions and SIPPs. And my last point there on this one as well is that if for anybody that is joining us from outside of the UK, I apologise as this is relatively UK focused. Whilst of course pensions are an issue that faces all, SIPPs are very, very unique to the UK. So just so that you are aware, this is very UK specific. Thank you so much for all the help on audio. I think everyone is now in and listening, which is fabulous. I'm glad that I'm all working as well. And I will kick off with what we're here for tonight in that case. So just as a quick brief bit of information, as I mentioned, Invest Engine will be sponsoring this webinar. I've got to give this little disclaimer here at the beginning with a few T's and C's, just to make sure that we're all following the rules and remaining compliant. But this evening, I'm going to be running through who we are here at Female Invest and Invest Engine, as well as retirement planning, why it's crucial, the 3-pillar pension system, and how to get started. So who are we here at Female Invest? Well, Female Invest was founded by the lovely Anna, Camilla and Emma on the right there. They met at business school in Copenhagen as they realised that whilst they had started investing as a trio, actually a lot of their female friends, peers, colleagues had not. And maybe you found the same, but they actually discovered that a lot of the information out there on the likes of retirement, pensions, is pretty jargon heavy, not super easy to understand, and actually something that they felt pretty intimidated by. And so since then, they decided to launch Female Invest, which is a platform. We're now Europe's largest educator for women when it comes to finances. They've also won the Forbes Search Under 30, become best-selling authors of 3 books, all of which you can get your hands on now, and do ask if you've got any further questions, as well as the Silicon Valley Y Combinator Prize. So Invest Engine, who are sponsoring this evening, I apologise, we seem to have lost the little dot off the I there, but Invest Engine is a low-cost platform with a ISA, GIA, business account and SIPP. I apologise, I just updated my presentation. I'm going to hop on to this one because I changed the spellings to make sure that everything was all up and running, and the SIPP is now launched. As I say, it was launched this morning at 11 a.m. But anyway, it's not seeming to want to play ball. So Invest Engine is a super low cost SIPP. It is 0.15%, and the charges are capped at £200 a year. There's full transparency on the platform, and there is a choice of different ETFs. For anybody that's unaware, an ETF stands for Exchange Traded Fund, and is a really popular type of fund amongst both new and long-term investors. So they're relatively simple to understand and quite low cost as well. But Invest Engine also has DIY or managed portfolios, as well as easy diversification. So to give you a flavour of what that kind of means and who they are, there is loads going on. And later in tonight's webinar, Elspeth will be showing us around the brand new SIPP and how the platform works as well. And last but not least, my name is Zoe. I'll be hosting tonight's webinar. I head up financial content here at Female Invest, but I'm a qualified financial advisor in the UK and the US. I've very much gone on my own investing journey as well. So if this is your first webinar, please don't feel that there is any question that you can't ask, because in my book, there is no such thing as a small question or a silly question. So retirement then. What is actually retirement? Because before we can start thinking about building it, you also need to have a think about what it actually looks like. As a few of the facts, national retirement age in the UK is now 66. But the average life expectancy in the country is hovering around the 85 mark, depending on where you are in the country. This is an average of around 20 years where you'll have, therefore, little to no earnings, and you need to fund with pensions or your retirement. There is also in that period potential costs of healthcare and other hurdles that might pop up. And if you open a newspaper, you'll likely see that there is all sorts of news around the private pension crisis, with the likes of nearly $1 trillion in debt in certain companies. What this means is that, as well as the government also reducing their spending on retirement, taking charge of your own pension has never been more important to make sure that you're able to fund what it is that you essentially want at retirement. So start having a think. Do you want luxury travel in retirement, or do you want to just be comfortable enough to enjoy being at home and also essentially living through retirement in a way that you want? Because spending in retirement isn't necessarily what we think it would be. As I mentioned, there could be some hurdles, including the likes of healthcare. But there can also be some other unexpected costs. If you think about your life when you're working, we generally split it into sort of 3 main sections. You spend around 8 hours a day at work, around about 8 hours a day asleep, and around about 8 hours a day in leisure. If you think about that leisure period, that's when you're perhaps going out, seeing family, doing hobbies, whatever it may be. That 8 hours whilst you're working, all right, you might pop out and get a bit of lunch. You might spend a bit on commuting as well, but it's probably not going to be as expensive as when you're in your leisure period. And then whilst you're sleeping, that should hopefully be the cheapest. Now, if you think about retirement, that work part disappears. So suddenly 16 hours of your day is pure leisure, and the remaining 8 hours you're still asleep. Maybe you've got a few extra hours in there for sitting back, drinking a bit more tea, whatever it might be that you want to do in your retirement. But it is more expensive than many think. So don't necessarily underestimate how much you might need to save to fund your retirement. One of the ways that you can start to have a think about how much you're going to need is by doing some calculations. Now, I know that Invest Engine has some fabulous calculators online. So if this part goes a little bit over your head, don't panic too much, because there are loads of online tools that can help you. But for anybody that's out there that kind of wants to know, but where do those numbers come from? It's essentially from this calculation. So we in the industry, and of course the likes of Invest Engine and other providers as well, are all running off a theory that what you essentially want to do is build up a pot of money that is invested, for example, Invest Engine, it's invested into ETFs. So it's growing. So whilst you're working and contributing to it, the pot that is there can really start to pick up a bit of size. But then when you reach retirement age, you don't want to just move it all into cash and stop it growing. Actually, you want to leave it there, still growing, so that you can then take away the growth each year and allow it to replenish. Think of it kind of like a plant. You prune the leaf and then the leaf grows back. It's exactly the same with your pension pot, or at least that's what we're working towards. So you need to calculate how much you want to be in that pot to be able to remove your annual income. And the way that you do that is with a simple calculation of a multiplication of 20. The first step of getting this is calculating your annual income. If you don't know what you want your annual income to be at retirement, take the one you've got right now. Then the next thing you need to do is multiply this by 20. This will give you the figure that you need in that pot to be able to take away that leaf and replenish it each year based on around 5% of growth. Now, that is what you'd need today. You haven't yet calculated any sort of inflation if you're a few years off retiring. And this is where those online calculators really come in handy. The reason for that is because at this stage of the calculation, it becomes a little bit more complex. You need the compounding figures, a table, calculator, etc. So for most people, it's not worth the effort. But it gives you the theory behind where those numbers come from. And if you do use those online calculators, it really gives you a feel for how much you might want to start building up into your pension pot. But many people say it's so far away. Why would I sort of start thinking about this? It feels like for me, it's a long way away, and therefore, what's the stress? There's a few reasons why starting with your pension early is really, really important. The first is to make sure that you are ensuring some sort of lifestyle that you want at retirement age. The next reason is to do with tax. There are tax breaks available to do with pensions that I'm going to come on to talk about just shortly. And for many of them, you need to make sure that you're using them. Otherwise, you may well lose them. So take advantage of them whilst you can. And last but not least, because of inheritance issues. Now, I know that Kirsty has asked a question about it in the chat box already, which I will come on to answer in detail at the end as well. But pensions are essentially what we see as relatively inheritance tax efficient. Another reason why people save into their pensions for that reason. Women in the UK then start their pensions with around 17% less and finish with 56% less. Pretty scary stuff. Just to reinforce why it is so important to start as soon as you can and with as much as you can as well. It currently means that at the moment, women need to start saving around age 4 to have the average pension around the same as men. So sooner is better when it comes to investing because it really helps to take advantage of this thing called compounding. And this goes actually for women, men, or whichever gender it is that you identify with. The reason for that is because essentially the more money that there is invested, the more money that there is to grow. And the great thing about pensions is that they are protected. So within your SIPP, for example, what you'll see is that your money can really start to pick up traction because there's no tax obligations once the money is in the SIPP. What I mean by that is it can grow tax-free, and any income that you receive on those investments is also tax-free. Now, coming back to the analogies, compounding for me is kind of like a snowball rolling down a mountain. The bigger the snowball gets, the more surface area it has. The more surface area it has, the more snow it can pick up. And so it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's exactly the same with your pension when it's invested. As I say, the tax burdens, or at least the lack of them, really helps to pick up traction, giving that snowball an extra push. So there's a 3-pillar system that you can follow to start structuring your overall pensions, because I've talked about the idea of SIPPs, and that's really what we're sort of here for today. But actually, the likelihood is that most of us will have other pensions also on the scene. And these will fall into these 3 main categories. So the first is that of the state pension. Now, here in the UK, we all get our state pension basically on the contributions that we make to national insurance. With national insurance, you make these contributions automatically if you're employed, but if you're self-employed, you'll probably see the impact of them going out a little bit more. In the UK, you need a minimum of 10 years of national insurance contributions to be able to get the minimum state pension. And you need a maximum of 35 years to be able to get the top state pension. Now, at the moment, you pay around 13.25% of your annual earnings to national insurance. This is pre-tax. If you're self-employed, it'll be a little bit different again. And then when you reach pensionable age, if you've got the full 35 years of contributions, at the moment, you'll get just over £10,000 per year. This does go up with inflation as well. So if you're a few years off retirement, it may well be that it looks like a little bit more. And if you've got less than that 35 years, it's essentially calculated on a 35th basis. So let's say that you've got 27 years, then you take that full amount, that 10,000 in this case, and divide it by 35 and times it by 27 to get the 27 out of 35ths as a fraction. A little bit further maths there for you. So essentially what you get from the state pension in the UK is, it's certainly there, it's an income, but for most of us, it's not a huge amount. It's also worth saying as well that at the moment you get at age 66, but it may well be 67 because it is creeping up as an age, depending on how old you are now as to when you can access it. The second pillar then on the three-pillar system is that of the employer pension. And with the employer pension, this is something that if you are employed, you'll likely have already set up and may not even know about it. In the UK, we have a system called auto-enrolment, and this means that you are automatically enrolled into an employer pension when earning over a certain amount. This means that there is a minimum of 8% of what you earn going into a pension every year. Your employer has to make, by law, 3% worth of contributions, and you make 5%. But really it's 4% because the government boosts what you've got with an extra 1% of tax. You can put up to £60,000 per tax year into your pensions. And it's worth noting that it's either £60,000 or the total amount that you've earned. So if you've earned £40,000 in a year, your max contribution is £40,000. If you've earned £70,000, then your max contribution is that upper limit of £60,000 per year. When you put money into a pension, you get basic rate tax deductions. So I said you put 5% in, but really it's 4%. The reason for that is because the government gives you back any tax you would have paid at basic rate, so 20%. You can also claim back any higher rate tax, but you have to do this via self-assessment tax return. Do ask me if you've got any questions on that as well. I know it gets a little bit more complex when we move through the various different tax brackets. Now, you can opt out of this employer pension if you wish. However, what I often say to people is if you do choose to do that, what you're basically doing is turning down a pay rise. You're missing out on that 3% the employer would have previously given you by law. And it's worth noting that if you are earning less than what the limit is, which at the moment is £6,240, you can, in some circumstances, still request to be enrolled on a pension as well. Now, some employers pay more than the minimum mandatory, which at the moment is 3%. Some people ask their employers if they'd be willing to boost it. And for you, it may well be worth that conversation just to see if they would do that. You never know if you don't ask. There's two main types then of employer pension that we have in the UK. There is the defined benefit and the defined contribution. And which one you have will really affect what you get at the end when you reach retirement, and also how it works whilst you're going through your employment. So the defined benefit, firstly, if you're in the private sector, these are relatively unusual now. They used to be called the sort of final salary pensions. But if you're in the public sector, so you work for the NHS, the police, the fire service, the military, or the, what have I missed out of those 5? There's another one. If you're a teacher, then you'll have a pension that looks a little bit like this. Essentially, what you get is an income when you retire. There is not necessarily a pot of money with your name on it that is invested, but rather it is the guarantee or the promise of an income as and when you reach a certain age. If you have one of these income-based pensions, what you can do in the private sector is request to move it to a lump sum. But usually that requires some level of financial advice and also a real assessment of the two different options. So the most of us will have what is known as a defined contribution pension. This is with our employer, just to be super clear as well. The defined contribution pension is a pot of money with your name on it. Both you and your employer pay in that certain amount, and you then get to choose the investment strategy, and hopefully it grows through time. When you reach retirement age, you've got 3 main options as to what you do with it. Firstly, you can either just take random amounts at random times. Secondly, you can instruct the pension company to pay you a set amount each month if you wish. And thirdly, you can choose to buy what is known as an annuity. This is basically an insurance product that then kind of converts it into the other type of pension. And this would basically pay you an income for the rest of your life. These have become a little bit less popular because the income that you get has got lower and lower for the amount that you put in, essentially. But it's one of those that's worth assessing as and when the time comes. Now, for whichever pension you've got, everybody in the UK can withdraw up to 25% of their pension tax-free. And then after that, you will pay tax at your marginal income rate. So if you imagine right now, you'll either know probably that you're basic rate taxpayer or a higher rate taxpayer, so you'll be paying 20% or 40%, whatever it might be. It's exactly the same when you reach retirement. You are essentially taxed on your pension income. That feels a bit mean. The reason for that is because you've paid in tax-free. It's then grown tax-free. And so when you start to withdraw from it is when you're taxed. But the good news is that often when you reach retirement, your earnings are that wee bit lower. And so as a result, your tax is usually also that little bit lower. So on to then the third part of the three-pillar system, which is the SIPP. And SIPP stands for Self-Invested Personal Pension. This is kind of the third bit and almost for me the most golden bit because the other two are mandatory. They're already there. You've got to have them. But having this third one on the go is really solidifying your overall retirement and pension plans. This can help you firstly top up what you've got. If, for example, your employer is not open to allowing you to put more into your employer pension, then a SIPP can be a great tool for it. It can really help to boost existing by giving you more investment options as well. Often with employer pensions, whilst you do get to choose how it's invested, it's not always super specific. So you'll choose often a certain risk profile or maybe a key theme, and then your pension will simply follow that. With SIPPs, you get a bit more flexibility. The clue is kind of in the name, self-invested personal pension. So if you're really wanting to take a charge of some of those investments, you can do that with a SIPP as well. And SIPP is great for having, I've gone through all these details of a SIPP, but I'll go through it again. A SIPP also has, as I say, tax-free growth. There is restricted access until the age of 55, though, and this is creeping up to 57 for anybody that's unaware. In the same way to how when you pay into your employer pension, you get basic rate tax back, it's exactly the same with the contributions that you make to the SIPP. But once again, these cannot exceed those annual allowances of either 60,000 or the total amount that you've earned. You can also, when you do eventually reach this age, as I say, be taxed on your SIPP, but it works in exactly the same way as that system that I just explained with your employer pension. It's also relatively inheritance tax efficient. So I know Kirsty's asked about this and I've seen other questions fire in. I've not seen if there's any others that have come in about this. But essentially, any SIPP or employer pension is what is known as valued outside of your estate for inheritance tax purposes. It kind of falls into a different category. So if you've got ISAs, for example, or you've got money in the bank, or indeed you hold other investment platforms, these will all form part of what we call your overall estate for inheritance tax purposes. The SIPP and any of the pensions fall outside of that. And so they pass on relatively neatly and in a slightly different way to other investments, which is why many people use them as part of their overall planning vehicle. If you've got any doubts about that, it might be worth speaking to a relevant advisor as well. Not only is a SIPP great for topping up your existing, but it's also great for picking up previous pensions. For most of us, we'll have more than one job. Indeed, as we move through our career, we might even change 2 or 3 times. And what this can mean is that we have a pension in each and every place. And if you're struggling to remember the name of the first pension company from the first company that you ever worked at, imagine what that might be like in 10, 20, 30 years as and when you do retire. A SIPP is a great way, I like to think of it almost as like hoovering up the old pensions. There's some scary figures out there about the billions, maybe even trillions now that are in missing pensions, whereby people have lost a track of them and can't find them again. So make sure that that's not you. If you do have multiple pensions out there, a SIPP is a great potential way to basically keep all of them pensions together and keep them growing as well. And last but not least, before I hand over to Elspeth, loads of people ask about the SIPP and the LISA and how the two confirm. Now, just to be super clear, we are talking about InvestEngine this evening, but InvestEngine at the moment don't have a LISA. They do have, however, a great ISA. I know that Steve has asked as well, if I max out my ISA, can I still add to the SIPP? And it's a nice point to answer that, Steve. Yes, you can. The ISA and the pension are sort of separate, really. And what that means is that you can use your full ISA limit and you can use your full SIPP limit if you wish. So the SIPP, to compare to that LISA, the two of them both have tax-free growth. However, as I say, their limits are kind of separate. However, the limit on those pensions is, as we've said a few times, £60,000 per year, or the total amount of your earnings for a SIPP. With a LISA, it's £4,000. For your ISAs overall, it's £20,000. There is income tax when you withdraw from a SIPP, but not on your ISAs. And the SIPP has pretty you cannot access it before the age of 55, and that is very, very strict, is what I was going to say. It's pretty tied in. Whereas the LISA, you can access it. There might just be penalties in place. And if we're talking about ISAs in general, there are no penalties generally. You have to stick up on the T's and C's with each and every provider, but that LISA is a bit more flexible. It's worth noting as well that on the inheritance tax front, ISAs and LISAs are a little bit less efficient. They form part of your estate, whereas SIPPs and other pensions do not. So I'm going to hand over to Elspeth, who's going to show us around the SIPP platform now for Invest Engine. It's so exciting, as I said at the beginning, that this has launched and we're able to have Invest Engine here today on the same day that it has gone live. So I'll hand over to you now, Elspeth, and I'll do my best to have a look at some of the questions to see what I can answer whilst you're going.
Amazing. Thanks, Zoe. I really appreciate it. Hi, everyone. Like Zoe said, I'm Elspeth and I'm part of the Invest Engine team. I'm very quickly going to show you our today launched SIPP and show you a little bit around the platform. So bear with me while I share my screen. Perfect. Cool. So this is our login page. You can see here it's there's an individual or business option. So on top of our individual ISA, general account, and now SIPPs, you are able to invest as a small business through Invest Engine in ETFs. Amazing, cool. So we have come into the dashboard. Just up here, you can see it's almost like Instagram. We've got a few stories that keep you up to date with what we are doing at Invest Engine, including one of our latest reports that shows how many fees we have saved our customers since we started, which is really exciting. Just going through here, you'll see that you've got options for your ISA, your general, and down here at the bottom is the personal pension. You see I've added some cash in here that has kicked me off and started my SIPP. So I'm just going to take you through how you can add a new portfolio, what the different options are, and just kind of let you see behind the scenes before you might have a look at this yourself. So when we click add new portfolio, we have the option here of do it yourself. So that is choosing your own investments. We've got nearly 600, over 590 ETFs on the platform at the moment that you can choose from, and I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. And we have the manage fee option. We have an in-house investment team with 10 different risk types on the platform, so growth 1 to growth 10. You'll have to go through a little bit of a questionnaire to match yourself to the right portfolio for you. So that is our managed service. That's 0.25% in fees. So we're just going to click on start a DIY account and choose pension, and that will open up our ETF range here. So there's lots of different ways you can look at this, and I appreciate that nearly 600 ETFs is kind of scary when you look at it in that way. But we can have a look and choose whether we want to invest in equities, bonds, alternatives, choose our provider, or even choose whether it's ESG, hedged, or accumulating here. So I'm going to have a look at X-Trackers, and I'm going to add the S&P 500 here, add that to my portfolio, and I'm going to add just a money market fund. We'll add that in here as well. So now I've added a couple of ETFs to my portfolio. I hit continue. I can change my weightings here. So if I wanted more in the S&P 500 and I wanted less in my money market fund, I can change the weightings here, and I can choose when I go through to make sure that my top-ups or investments align to this every time I add money into my portfolio, into my account, and I'll show you how you can do that as well. So I'll hit review and continue. This will let me know what I'm investing in, whether that's region, sector, which is really cool, and which holdings. So you can see here 4.2% in Apple, we've got 1% in Tesla, and the list just goes on. So we'll hit save and continue. and we're ready to start investing. Amazing. So just here, I can choose to change some settings. Like I said, auto invest lets you keep auto investing any cash that you put into your portfolio as you've set out here. You can also set up a savings plan that will allow you to add regularly to your SIPP or ISA or general account or business account, depending on what you are opening, from just £10 a week. We'd set that up now. And you can also share your portfolio and change the name and yeah, kind of keep going with that. So that is our DIY pension. It's exactly the same process for an ISA, a general account or a business account. And as I said, if you wanted to open a managed account, you just have to answer a couple more questions, make sure that the investments are aligned to your personal investment goals and what you're looking to do on the platform, and that will get it started for you. So yeah, hopefully a whistle-stop tour in what we're up to at Invest Engine.
Absolutely fabulous. Thank you. And as I say, this is really an exciting sort of opportunity for us to be here and have a look at it and to get a hands-on feel as well for what that looks like. I know a few questions have come in that I just want to answer as well, because I think some of them are super relevant for what we've just seen there with Elspeth and also what we've just talked about this evening. The first is from Steve, being self-employed. How does that work with a SIPP and how do you add into it? Essentially, Steve, if you've said, you know, it's to do with earnings, and what if you've not essentially got any earnings at the moment, and the lower limit then is around this, just over £3,000. The figure's a little bit silly what it actually is, but it's worth having a look on the government website as to what it is. So you can put up to £3,000. It's not nothing, but it's much, much lower if you've got no earnings, basically, and you're living off savings. We've also been asked a question which popped up, and I was just thinking about that in terms of getting a SIPP. If you've already retired as well, from Amanda, you can still have the SIPP. Now, I don't know if Invest Engine have an age restriction at the moment on the SIPP. Elspeth, do you happen to know that at all?
Not offhand, but we can always drop that back.
Yeah, that'd be fabulous. I feel like when I've looked before, there's not, but essentially the rules around a SIPP are that there is usually no age restriction. And if you've already retired, all it means is that that annual contribution limit is lower. So if you've started withdrawing from your pension already, your annual maximum limit is 10 grand. So that's all you have to be aware of. But you can still have one as well, Amanda, if you've already retired. So we've also had a question, which is, Sinead said, okay, so what's better then, increasing your employer one or starting a SIPP? Now, of course, the decision for everyone will be very different. There's never a best or a worst as of such, Sinead. So the SIPP does come with more flexibilities often in terms of the investment choices that you can pick. As we've seen there with Elspeth, there's over 560 different ETFs available in the Invest Engine one, which may well be different to what you get with your employer pension, for example. But some people might want to go for their employer pension and keep contributing more to that just for a little bit of admin and ease. Both are perfectly viable. Neither's wrong as of such. Just depends in terms of what you want from your own systems and administration. And Bahana's asked as well, are we getting taxed when we take the pension money out after retirement? What are the restrictions? So there are no restrictions as of such, Bahana. It is just that you then get taxed on them when you start taking them out. Julia as well has asked about the self-assessment to get tax back. And I think I've had another one that's very, very similar from Peter about how this works for being a higher rate taxpayer. So I'm not an accountant nor a tax advisor. So it is worth speaking to somebody relevant, again, if this is the case for yourselves. But essentially what it means is that if you're hovering in that higher rate tax bracket, there is opportunities to get that back. There's further information, again, on the government website as well about how this works. And it may well be worth looking into if that is the case for yourself. There's another question that's come in too about Invest Engine being protected by the FSCS. And yes, Carla, it is. That was one I wanted to make sure that I answered as well. It is protected. And of course, pensions are protected in a slightly different way. But Invest Engine is covered by all of those protections, which means that for anybody that's unaware, if you've got money in the Invest Engine ISA, for example, and heaven forbid, I don't think it will, but if Invest Engine for whatever reason didn't exist, then you'd be protected by up to £85,000 with the money that is in there. And as I say, pensions are separate to that again, so you wouldn't need to stress if you've got your pensions in the same place as your ISA as well. I think this might be one for you, actually, Elspeth, in terms of the difference between the auto investment and the savings plan. How does that look on the Invest Engine platform at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. So auto invest is a feature that allows you to invest, particularly for the DIY side, the way you want to. So for example, if you had 40% of your portfolio weighted to the S&P 500 and say 60% to the FTSE 100, any money that you would add into your account would invest exactly the way that you want it to do. Which is a pretty cool feature. You don't have to manually go in and make sure it's going where you want it to. And then our savings plan is a way to just top up your investment accounts. So we are able to try and do it as fast as possible, really, through savings plans. So you can do it from as low as £10 a week, but you can do it weekly, fortnightly, or monthly, whichever suits with you and how you want to add to your investment portfolio. But what we're trying to do is help you get your investments to kind of keep working for you, and the money goes into your account. It's auto invested how you want it to, so you know that peace of mind is there. So hope that helps.
I certainly think it does. And before we lose you, I think we've got a few more questions actually as well. That are there's a few that are very, very Invest Engine specific, which is the first. And I believe it is possible to collect previous pensions into the SIPP with Invest Engine, right?
Yeah. So we're working on our transfer feature at the moment. I know there's been a couple of questions about that. So we've launched it today. It's kind of our beta launch. We'll be bringing in transfers and hopefully employer contributions shortly. But we've had so much demand and so many people wanting to just open their SIPP with us due to the low cost that we wanted to make sure we get it out there. So yeah, you'll be able to transfer into our SIPP soon. I'm going to put a deadline on that for our poor team. So yeah, as soon as we will have that feature available, we'll obviously let everyone know. And yeah, you'll be able to transfer wherever they are, and we're going to try and help do that in the best way possible. So keep your eyes peeled.
Amazing. And another question's come in that you might, I don't know whether you'll know the answer to this one, but let's just give it a whack. Somebody's asked, can you transfer your existing Invest Engine portfolio into the SIPP at the moment, or is it protected?
Yeah, so we're working on that as well. We know that some people want to move their general account into their SIPP, or even their ISA into their SIPP. We just want to make sure that we've got all of those things in place, and we're looking after our customers as best as possible. So it's coming.
I'm sure.
We will get there.
As I say, it's super exciting. And another question that's just come in, Invest Engine based, which is from Maria. Is there an option to pause or stop regular contributions if for whatever reason circumstances change?
100%. So it's just a toggle in the system. You can literally just go in and turn it off and on as best you need. So we appreciate that things change. You know, we don't charge fees for you to take things out or anything like that. It's, you know, you just have to wait for your ETFs to be sold. So we're here to support that at any time, because we know not everything is perfect all the time. So yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. I'm just having a look through as well if there's any other questions. I think I've missed quite a few in the chat box as well, but I think you're on them, Elspeth, and I'll stick on these ones on the Q&A as well. I've just seen a question fire in as well about having more than one SIPP. Would it be useful to do so for different risk profiles? So you can have more than one. It's not normally the way that people approach it, and the only reason for that is because SIPPs offer a certain level of flexibility that mean that you don't need to have different ones for different risk profiles, because you can already choose all of that inside the SIPP, if that makes sense. So yes, you can, but it's not always the approach that people take. Julie's asked a question as well about American citizens. I don't know if Invest Engine can take American citizens at the moment. I know that it's a really, really difficult one. Elspeth's shaking her head, so she can't. But with SIPPs in general, Julia, they're actually a slightly different category. They're what the US Inland Revenue Service see as non-look-through. So they look similar enough to basically the 401k, that what that means is that you are relatively safe with the investments that you choose. Now, I'll say you should double, triple check that, as always, with your US accountant, US tax advisor, whoever it is. But that was what the rules were, to my understanding, essentially. And then I've been asked two questions about this. Fabio and Peter have asked as well about moving current employer pensions into the SIPP. Can you do it part way? How does that work? So you can move You can, on paper, move bits, but usually the pension provider don't want you to move it until you've left your current employer. Now, again, it's T's and C's. Every pension is slightly different. Every SIPP is slightly different as to whether they accept you, basically. But usually what people do is they wait to combine pensions until after they've left a certain job, and the pension moves into a sort of process as what we call dormant, which makes it sound quite silly. But anyway, that is essentially what it is as well. So Alessia's asked as well, in terms of the tax, when you do start taking from SIPPs or pensions for that matter, your income at pensionable age, so that you're aware, is your pension and any other form of income that you've got. So, for example, state pension is also income and could therefore be taxed, as are, let's say, if you've got property, you're renting it out, that's another form of income. So generally, when you retire, your income is not zero, rather your income is simply replaced from being a salary to what you're taking from pensions or state pensions or whatever it might well be. Gloria's asked as well, I'm sorry, I'd like to hear about a SIPP for people under a skilled worker visa. I'm by no stretch of the imagination an expert on different visa categories. I don't know if you've got any knowledge on that at all, Elspeth, and how that works. No problem at all. I'm really sorry, Gloria. If you do want to drop me a message afterwards, I can do a bit of digging for you to see what I can find. But at the moment, that's not something that I know an awful lot about. Just having a look to see if any others are coming in. I can see Elspeth is tackling a few. Lauren has asked as well, can you talk about the potential launch of the UK government pension dashboard and timelines? I can give you my opinion on it, Lauren. Of course, it's only my opinion, I'll say. So at the last budget, for anybody that's unaware, in November, we did, it was talked about that there would be a universal pension. I can't remember what they were calling it at the time. But it was basically going to mean that everybody could keep with that one pension. I think it's a nice idea. It would help things to be streamlined. I personally believe that we're a long way off that. What that would basically mean is that every employer would be obligated to pay into whatever pension you wanted them to, which would be nice, because that would mean, for example, if you liked Invest Engine, you go to any employer and say, well, you're going to pay into my Invest Engine pension. But the administration from an employer point of view is absolutely wild, because if you've got a small business, let's say you're a hairdresser, for argument's sake, you've got 5 employees on your book, you're having to pay into 5 different pensions. It's really quite a lot of work. So it was muted. It was talked about. Yes, maybe it'll be a thing. I think there's a lot of, we've got to go through a lot of developments and process before we get to that stage. So it's not something that I'm necessarily getting too stressed about personally, but let's just wait and see. Yeah, Steve, you asked a few questions as well. It's no problem at all. Don't ever apologise for asking questions. As I say, I think a few of them, if you just drop me a quick email afterwards, Steve, I'll do my best to follow up on some of them as well. Sinead has asked, is there a way to invest into a SIPP post-tax? Yes and no is the answer to that. Again, not not a tax advisor, but no, essentially the way that our pensions work is that you go in pre-tax. Michelle has asked as well, could you say a little bit more about the managed portfolio, Elspeth? Just talk a little bit more about how that works.
Yeah, so it's technically robo-advisor, but there's people behind the robos. Our managed portfolios, there's 10 options going from kind of risk averse to less risk averse. And the questions that we ask when you sign up for a managed portfolio kind of take you through those questions as to whether you are more or less risk averse, and then that will be open for you. So it's a very hands-off, relaxed approach. You won't be choosing the ETFs. It's invested in. Our investment team does that for you. They do all the research, which is amazing. We've just put out a blog, and we're doing a webinar tomorrow on our managed portfolios and how they performed over the last kind of 12 months and beyond, and their strategy for this year, which is really exciting. The fee for that is a 0.25% fee, and that is all your charge, which is on one of the lowest on the markets. You can obviously go and do all your own research, and we've got some handy bits and bobs on our website. You can have a look. So yeah, that's how it works. It's kind of set and let our guys do their thing. But we also give you the option to do DIY. If you want to have, for example, a general account, and try DIY yourself and have a play around with £100, that's cool. And then have your ISA managed or your pension managed. It's super simple. So you can start learning from what they're doing and try it out yourself as well. So hopefully that helps. If you've got any more questions, let me know.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just seen a question come in from ZM again. If you're struggling to find the answered questions, if you go into the answered tab, I think you'll be able to find them all in there. If it's disappeared suddenly, it's either because we've answered it out loud or because the answer bit is in there. So don't panic about that either. You'll be able to see them there. You won't be able to see them in the recording, just so that you know. Jennifer has also asked a question, and I think we can both do a dual-pronged attack on this one, Elspeth, which is that she's moving to France in the next few years. How did this work? So from my end, Jennifer, on paper, you can keep hold of a SIPP if you do move abroad. There's nothing stopping you doing that. But some pension companies are able to do that and others aren't. Do you know what the current rules are from Invest Engine's end, Elspeth?
Yeah, so we serve UK residents, and that's where we're at the moment. Yeah, it would depend on where your tax residency is and where you live, like that sort of thing. But our support team can go through all of that. It's all in our FAQs. So yes.
No, really good to know. It's a difficult one. It's that horrible B word essentially led to all of that. So the less said about that, the better, I think, this evening. And I know that we've had sort of 2 more questions as well, just about the overall investing strategy. I think you kind of on them, one from Fabio about any plans for algo trading in how that works.
Yeah, not at the moment. As far as I know, that hasn't come up. So we're definitely, keeping to our ETFs. All our ETFs are traded on the London Stock Exchange, and that's where we're at the minute. Not to say that we're not. We have a kind of very active community page on our website where you can throw these ideas in, and our head of product or team often answer those directly back to you. So you can always hit up a debate and start that over there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the last one that I've seen in the Q&A box is from Michelle, which is it similar to the Vanguard Life strategy? I believe it is, but if you've got anything further to add as well, Elspeth.
Yeah, obviously Vanguard's life strategy is their kind of product names and their own thing. We offer the Vanguard ETFs, but with the ETFs, obviously you've got the diversification, having multiple companies in one fund, and with our managed ones, there's a few of those ETFs, and our team work hard to make sure that they're working for you at the different risk levels. So yeah, but if you want to talk about Vanguard versus us and fees and that sort of thing, our support team can help you on that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, perfect. Well, that has been absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much for coming along with so much enthusiasm, so many questions. As I mentioned, this will be recorded and we'll sort that out afterwards. I know a few people have asked, you need to be a female invest member. I'll discuss that with Elspeth at the end. I apologise, we've not quite sorted that bit out. But if you do need anything, you've got contact details there. So don't hesitate to sort of reach out, connect, ask away. Hopefully that has given you some good top tips as to how you can start planning your retirement, how you can navigate SIPPs, and also take a look at the super brand new, cool and exciting Invest Engine one as well. Have a lovely evening, a great week, and see you all soon. Bye for now.